So we're here in Ramanashram's Goshala, and we want to talk about the early days of the Goshala, even the days before there was a Goshala, and how we got a Goshala. What were the beginnings of the ashram Goshala, which actually started with Lakshmi coming as a baby calf in December of 1926. But of course, in December of 1926, there was nothing here, you know, and we have photos to prove that. Like we have photos from 1925. And we can see in one photo, I remember, there's Bhagavan's in that photo, and it's an angle shooting out from approximately where today's Nirvana room is, out towards the road. And there's no perimeter walls around the ashram, and there's no buildings in the ashram. Of course, there's no dining hall, there's no old hall, there's not even, there's no mother shrine, there's a grass structure around the mother samadhi. There's no office, there's no bookstall. There's no Goshala, and you can look out and you can see a dirt road going in front of Ramanashram. And in that one photo, there's a bullock cart going down. So you can see that road already in action, but there's nothing separating the ashram from the road. And you can see that Vinayaka temple there. That was already there, and that Mantapam just next to it was already there in those years. Well, let's see. So then in 1920, well, probably late 25 or 1926, early 26, there's an abandoned kiln across the street, and there's a lot of bricks that have been left there, and Bhagavan wants to get those bricks. One night, they move all those bricks, all of them, over in one night, and they use those bricks to build really the first structure in Ramanashram that was of 4 walls around the mother shrine. And then they put a grass hut over it. And it may be, we're not sure, we can't confirm this, but maybe some of those bricks, perhaps all of those bricks, went in to make the old hall. The old hall, we think, was started somewhere in 1926 and probably didn't get finished till late 27. It could have began as late as 1927 and gotten finished in late 1927. So when Lakshmi showed up here, there was really not much of an ashram. And if you remember the story, Bhagavan refused. Because that Arunachal Pillai, I don't know if you remember, but Arunachal Pillai, he had a dream. He was from Gudiyatam, up near Vellore. I think his village name was something like Kumaramangalam, something like that. He'd had a dream, and in the dream, he was a devotee. He was a devotee of Arunachala, and he knew about Bhagavan. And in the dream, he was told he was supposed to give his next calf to Bhagavan, but he didn't have a calf at that time. But within 2 months, one of his cows gave birth to a calf on a Friday. That was Lakshmi. And so he took the train. He decided to give the mother as well to the ashram. So he came down on a train, December 1926, came to the ashram, brought the cow and calf before Bhagavan. Bhagavan was still in those days, he was living in the veranda in front of the mother shrine, and he would do his darshans in that mother shrine itself. So he was in the hall. In those days, it was just a few walls around the samadhi with that grass roof, peat roof. So finally, it fell to Ramanatha Brahmachari to go in and tell Bhagavan there was somebody here offering a cow and calf, and that he wanted to donate it to Bhagavan. Bhagavan said, nothing doing. We have no place to keep a cow and calf. And it's really true. There weren't even places for the devotees to sleep, You have those funny accounts that come in the early years where, Bhagavan sometimes would pass out bricks to people to use as pillows for their head because they were just sleeping under the open sky, under the Ilapai tree, So not only was there not room for a cow and a calf, the devotees themselves didn't have a place to live, And but Ramanatha Brahmachari, who was, we know from the history that Ramanatha Brahmachari was by his nature very meek and very timid and mild and very silent. And for whatever reason, he was moved to speak out very boldly. And then he said, I declare that I will take responsibility for this cow and calf. And Bhagavan said, okay, let it be. You do that. So that was done. The cow and calf were accepted. Ramanatha Brahmachari took over looking after them. What we understand is that Ramanatha Brahmachari built a kind of small enclosure. Maybe it was just bamboo poles or something to keep them isolated. But one of the concerns, of course, was that still in those days there were leopards living on the hill. So it was not very safe. And Ramanatha Brahmachari, he was the type of fellow who was serving everybody. He was doing a little bit of everything for everybody. So it's not clear how much time he had available to him. So finally, after about a couple of months, the cow and calf were given into the care of Pashupati Iyer, who lived in town, had a Goshala in town. And he took them and cared for them on behalf of the ashram. So that was the first year. At the end of a year, the story goes, and this is Devaraj Mudaliar who gives us this timeline. So he says at the end of the year, Pashupati Iyer came to bathe in Pali Tirtham. It was a solar eclipse. And this is one way we can anchor this timeline, Devaraj Mudaliar's timeline, is that in fact there was an eclipse December 24th of 1927. So it lines up. So it makes those dates that Devaraj Mudaliar seem valid, That's the way the story has been written, that in December of 27, he came and presented Bhagavan with this. Now this calf is a year old now. And this is really Bhagavan's first meeting with Lakshmi, really. I mean, only before it was just the discussion was only over the subject of whether the ashram would accept the mother and the calf. And the calf just takes to Bhagavan. This is by everyone's account, and was jumping for joy in Bhagavan's presence. Well, what makes that date interesting is because Pashupati, as agreed, took the cow and calf back to his Goshala. It was only to show them to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan commented on how well the calf was growing up and so forth. Well, that calf, that means Lakshmi, young Lakshmi, she didn't have that name at that point. That calf started coming on her own to the ashram. Now, she had evidently walked with Pashupati Iyer from town, from his Goshala in town, so she knew the way. So she started coming to the ashram on her own. And that was pretty amazing for people. And the mother didn't come with him. Pashupati Iyer didn't come with him. The calf would come and spend the day with Bhagavan. And then Bhagavan in the evening would tell the calf to go back home. And the calf would, So that went on for some time. And of course, that's when Bhagavan got to know Lakshmi. And one day, and I'm trying to remember when that was. Anyway, it was suggested to Bhagavan that the calf have a name. And so Bhagavan said, well, she was born on a Friday. She came to the ashram on a Friday. And she should be called Lakshmi. So that's how she got the name Lakshmi. So now, that's the beginning of that story. Simultaneously, of course, we have the ashram trying to expand and grow. So while this is going on, while Lakshmi's growing up in Pashupati's care in the first few years of her life, meanwhile, the old hall's being built, 1927, late 1927 probably, was first inaugurated as a kitchen and a dining hall, which it was never used as such. If you see those early photos of the old hall, it has a chimney on top, but it was never used as a kitchen. It was built as a kitchen, but before it ever got used, it was clear that there needed to be a place for Bhagavan to give darshan. That was a greater priority. So at that time, next to the old hall, what is now the old hall, even before that building was built, there was a thatched hut for the cooking and the dining, which was at that time, from the early years, next to the thatched mother shrine, okay? So that was the layout. Mother shrine, thatched dining hall, old hall. Then subsequently, there was a proper sort of bricks-like building built in what is now the Samadhi hall for that dining room. So that's late 1927, 28. Then, somewhere in 28, probably, that Sofa Gounder from, where was he from, Polachi? No, he was from, I think he was from Polachi. But anyway, Palani, he may have been Palani. But anyway, he came to what is now the old hall, and it wasn't called that then, of course. It was called Bhagavan's Darshan Hall. And he found Bhagavan sitting on like a stone slab in that hall, like a bench or something, And he felt bad. He felt, this is not proper for Bhagavan to be sitting on such. And so he took it upon himself to go to town, and here in town he had the sofa made at sofa maker here in town. It took like 3 days. And he presented that sofa to Bhagavan. Bhagavan didn't want to have anything to do with that sofa, you know. But that gounder just wept before Bhagavan until he would accept that sofa. A little bit like Arunachal Pillai trying to get Bhagavan to accept the cow and calf. And mind you, when Arunachal Pillai presented Lakshmi to Bhagavan, Bhagavan said, no, you take it back to Kumaramangalam, to your village. You look after it on our behalf. And that Arunachal Pillai said, even if you cut my throat, I will not accept them back. He was very dramatic. So Gounder was a little like that. He wept and wept until Bhagavan agreed to take that sofa. Finally, Bhagavan agreed, you know. So that same Gounder, he wanted a Goshala to be built. He wanted that to be the first building in the ashram. Even though at that time, it's not clear to me. I don't think there were, in fact, I'm pretty sure there were no cows in the ashram because Lakshmi was still in town. And but anyway, so he gave the money for the building of the Goshala, which was built opposite our present dining hall. It's now our ashram store. Again, a little same theme like the old hall. It was supposed to be a Goshala, and if you go in there even today, the little rings are on the wall to tether the cows. But it was never used as a Goshala. And when it was inaugurated as the store because Chinnaswamy found, see, in those days it was so rustic and there were real needs. Like they had food that was being donated to the ashram for devotees and guests who would come, but no safe place to store them. Rats and mice and other animals could get into the food. So they needed a solid building to store the food. And the only solid building at that point, means like a concrete building or brick building, was our Goshala. Was our old hall, was the old hall. It had a proper roof. So rats couldn't get in there, but that's not an appropriate place to store food. So then Chinnaswamy, before it was even inaugurated, the Goshala Gounder had given the money for, became the ashram store. Well, Gounder was heartbroken, you know. He was heartbroken. And in fact, the word is that he just wouldn't even come to the ashram because he was so hurt that his Goshala got to be a store. So now that weighed on Chinnaswamy a little bit. You know, he felt a little bit bad, you know. So now he wanted to do Sofa Gounder right, right, and build a Goshala. So I think it's not clear, but maybe 1928 or 29 that the store was built. Okay? So now we can come back to Lakshmi's story because according to the timeline, in 1930, Lakshmi got pregnant. She's grown up now. She got pregnant. She had her calf, and Pashupati Iyer, I think it was the day after, or maybe a couple days after, brought Lakshmi with her calf. Since this time her mother had died. So he just brought her and her baby, I think it was a girl, to the ashram to present to Bhagavan. And I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was in the kitchen. Someone suggested to Bhagavan that now's the time to bring Lakshmi here permanently to the ashram. And Bhagavan said yes, he agreed. even though at that point there's still no Goshala. So that's what happened. So she shifted to the ashram permanently from 1930, probably around that time. And that's Devaraj Mudaliar's date, and it's probably accurate. Okay, so now you've got a store, a Goshala that's become a store that can't house cattle because it's being used as a store, and you have a kind of a makeshift thing for Lakshmi. And of course, as imagine, Lakshmi, you know, she got into mischief in those early days because she would just go into the garden and just eat whatever plants were there, you know. And the devotees would be furious, and they would curse Lakshmi for Bhagavan. He said, look, it's your fault. If you don't want her eating the spinach plants, you better tether her or put a fence around the spinach plants, you know. You can't blame her, and so on like that. So there were several incidents like that. Then finally, it was the magistrate, Sundaram, what was his name? Well, anyway, Sundaram, he gave 500 rupees for a Goshala. Remember, Sofa Gounder's, endowment had gone for the store. So there was no money at that point for a Goshala. So that Chetty, that magistrate, gave 500 rupees. It was Salem Sundaram. He's from Salem, yeah. He gave 500 rupees for Goshala. So they started, and 500 rupees was a lot of money in those days, but you can't build this with 500 rupees even in those days. So they started building the Goshala. But then Chinnaswamy would come around, and suddenly the dimensions of the Goshala would get bigger every day, you know. Now, keep in mind, when this Goshala was started, the only buildings in the ashram were the old hall and the store and sort of the mother shrine, which just had 4 walls. And everything else was grass, okay? Grass huts, you know, including the dining hall. So they started building this, and these very large dimensions, 48-foot length walls. So this is way bigger than the store, way bigger than the old hall. And at that point, so far as we know, there's really just Lakshmi and her daughter. That's the only cows in the ashram, okay? Now, there's some dispute about how that happened. You know, see, some people say Bhagavan never interfered in anything that went on in the ashram. He never installed himself in that. He just stepped back. But we know that Bhagavan had a will. I mean, a will meaning he knew what was the right thing to do. And we know that his, what he knew to be the right way to do things eventually would get done, even without him giving directions, you know. So it's not really clear what happened, but Chinnaswamy was, of course, beside himself with worry about how you were ever going to build a building out of granite at this dimension with the no money that they had at that time. There was just no money available. Anyway, that's a very interesting story. I won't go into it too much because it's too long, but it's very interesting the way that developed. I mean, for example, there came a point where as this large building started to be built with sculpted granite floor, and well, now we can see in there these large teak wood beams. It came to a point where they couldn't even pay the workers, you know. And so just at a time when the work was going to have to stop because they couldn't even afford the salary for the workers, just at that time, I mean, this is, again, just one story of how this very dramatic story unfolded. Just at that time, it so happens, the way the story goes, there was the Maharaj. No, he wasn't the Maharaj. He was the son of the Maharaj. He was the prince of Vijayanagar. And he didn't know Bhagavan, and Bhagavan didn't know him. He had never been here before. But he was on a tiger hunt, and he found himself in a very precarious situation before a tiger. I think the gun jammed or whatever. I guess in those days, that's what, if you were a Maharaj, that's what you did. You went on tiger hunts. Well, there he was at the key moment, and the gun was jammed, and he was convinced that that tiger was going to come for him. So he prayed like anything, but he didn't know who to pray to. But he had read, about 2 weeks earlier, he had read in the Sunday Times a story about Bhagavan, which really impressed him. So he started praying to Bhagavan. And in that prayer, he said, if you get me out of this mess, I promise to send you a check immediately for 1,000 rupees and the skin of this enemy who's going to eat me if you don't help me. Well, to make a long story short, the animal was shot and killed with one shot, and this fellow kept his promise. He sent immediately a money order for 1,000 rupees. That was just at this time when they couldn't even pay the workers, the Goshala workers, the construction workers. And a month later, he sent that tiger skin. That's the famous tiger skin that we see in the photos of Bhagavan sitting on the tiger skin. So that's one kind of dramatic event that happened. Another is that, see, that got them through one crisis, but another crisis came up. They realized they needed way more support for the ceiling. They also put a grill over the center of the Goshala there to keep the leopards out, because the leopards would climb over and just come in and have one of these little guys they can make a meal of, you know. So there was a lot of expenses that were unforeseen, and I think the amount was 3 tons of wood they needed, 3 tons of Burmese teak wood they needed. And there was some visitor here at that time from Chennai, and he said, no problem, I can arrange that, no problem. And he did. He went back to Chennai, he arranged the consignment. It was 3 tons of teak wood, had it sent. It was here within a few days. The only thing is that with the wood came a bill for 3,000 rupees. Chinnaswamy thought, the way the guy said it, that he was footing the bill. And what the guy had understood was that he was just arranging the transport, the sale, you know, and giving it at a good price. So now Chinnaswamy had this massive bill. That was unheard of in those days. You know, that was double the amount of money that had ever even been donated for the project. Anyway, that was the final hurdle. As it turns out, the more wealthy devotees in the community heard about what was happening. Chinnaswamy was, you know, I mean, Chinnaswamy had headaches during the project all along the way. If you remember, even early on, when Chinnaswamy was trying to raise money for this and other projects, he was going to go on a fundraising tour in North India. And the train ticket was bought, and he had his bags packed. And he came before Bhagavan to take leave, and Bhagavan didn't say anything, just looked at him, you know. And he said, you know, everybody's coming here for a reason. What's the need to go somewhere else? Like that. He didn't say don't go raise money, but we know that Bhagavan didn't like, and Chinnaswamy obeyed that. He didn't actively solicit funds, you know, and he didn't want any devotee actively soliciting funds on behalf of the ashram. But that was his way of communicating, you know, so many people are coming here, why are you going there, you know? And at that, Chinnaswamy just gave up, went, unpacked his bags. That was the end of his fundraising tour. So he was being kind of pushed from two sides. Bhagavan, no fundraising was saying from this side. From the other side were coming all these expenses. So it was maddening for him, you know. But this was the final hurdle crossed when these devotees came forward, agreed to pay that 3,000 rupee bill, and the Goshala is finished, you know. So, and if you go in there, and we can do that, we can go in and look, but some of those Burmese beams, you know, those Burmese teak beams are this big. It's a really substantial quantity of wood, you know. And then, of course, the granite, and, you know. So that was 1930-ish, maybe. I don't know when it was inaugurated exactly. Could be 31, but somewhere around that time. Sofa Gounder, of course, was invited for the inauguration and was thrilled to see that just a 2-year wait, he got this result instead of that store, you know. So he was thrilled. And what Bhagavan had predicted, you know, see, the whole logic of this, Lakshmi being the goddess of fertility, the goddess of abundance, the goddess of multiplication and prosperity, that if you built this building for Lakshmi, and now we're speaking about Cow Lakshmi, then all the money would come for the other building projects. And that turned out to be true. It seems, again, it seemed crazy, I probably imagine, to Chinnaswamy and probably to other devotees, that you would build this nice structure for a single cow while the devotees are sleeping on the ground in grass huts, you know. But Bhagavan was operating a completely different system of understanding. That if you do this, then the grace will come, you will get the money for the other buildings. And it so happened, when the inauguration took place, there was money left over from this project to start the other projects. And it was just as Bhagavan had predicted. So the building of the Ramanashram really began after this inauguration. So we have, like, for example, things like, for example, in May of 37, we have the store, the ashram book stall, and the office built. September of that year, sorry, I said 37. It was built in 37. It was inaugurated in May 38. September 38, the dining hall was inaugurated. In 42, the dispensary was inaugurated. Electrification of the ashram was in 1942. Vedapata Sala came up in somewhere in those years. First as a grass hut, and then later something more substantial. Anyway, it was just like Bhagavan had said. Right, now, but a little bit back to Lakshmi's story. So that day of inauguration comes, and there's a discussion about, okay, whenever, as we all know, in South India, when you inaugurate a new building, the cow enters first, right? That's the tradition. But some argued, no, in the case of inaugurating a Goshala, Bhagavan should go first, not Lakshmi. So there was a dispute about that, and Bhagavan said, no, Lakshmi has to go first. But it didn't turn out like that. Lakshmi came to Bhagavan in the hall, and Bhagavan said, oh, she's calling me to they were preparing, all the festoons were being hung in the building, they were getting ready for the inauguration. And Lakshmi came and wouldn't leave the old hall until Bhagavan came. So Bhagavan says to the devotees there, oh, Lakshmi's calling me to her new home. So they go, and everyone's expecting Lakshmi to go first, but she refuses. So she makes Bhagavan go first, and she follows in behind Bhagavan. And that was the inauguration of the Goshala with Gounder there. In the early 30s. Lakshmi, there's a lot happens in the course of her life, and of course with her passing, very interesting. It's just some brief facts. Of course, she gave birth. She birthed 9 calves in her time here, and 3 of them. This is Devaraj Mudali. I'm absolutely, and we have this from other sources, where 3 of them on Bhagavan's Jayanti day. That's extraordinary fact. Now, I remember someone, and I couldn't figure out who it was, I couldn't remember who it was, but someone had said there were others that were born on a Purnavasu day. That means not on the Jayanti day, but on another Purnavasu in another month, But at least 3 were born on Bhagavan's Jayanti day. That's an extraordinary, the probability that 1/3 of her offspring would be born on that day. There's so many, and devotees know all these stories, so there's no point going through them, but there's just so many extraordinary stories about Lakshmi, just her intelligence. Intelligence is not the right word. Her human-like character, and just her, and her love for Bhagavan. She's got to be one of the greatest devotees that we've had. There's no mistake about it. And if you think that, well, maybe this chronicler or that chronicler is exaggerating those stories, you just read the dozens of little observations that various devotees made, and devotees who are not given to exaggeration. There's no question those stories are not exaggerated. She really was a devotee. She really loved Bhagavan, and he clearly loved her. There's no question about it. Of course, she lived 22 years, that's the life expectancy of a cow. So she lived a good, long life. In June of 1948, she fell sick. And Bhagavan came. Now, by that time, of course, this Goshala was here. I assume she was in either this outer veranda room or inside there where she was laying. And Bhagavan came to see her. And then Nagama was here. Venkataratnam were here looking after her. The Goshala attendant was here looking after her. That veterinarian had come to look after her. But anyway, towards the end, she didn't get up anymore. And on the last day, Bhagavan came to see her and sat with her with his hands on her like he did with his mother. Everyone has read this story, so Nagama tells it very well. It may be told, Devaraj Mudali makes mention of it, Nagama tells it in a very detailed way. He sat with her with his hands on her for like 30 minutes and stared into her eyes. And according to Nagama, there were tears coming from her eyes. And And he left before she passed away. And Nagama said, Bhagavan, don't you want to stay here a little longer? It's not necessary. The devotees are waiting. He left. While he was away, she passed away. Now, the reader might think, well, Bhagavan should have stayed those last few minutes, you know. So, and Nagama was thinking the same thing. So she asked Bhagavan, this is subsequent to Lakshmi's interment, you know, Bhagavan, why did you leave Lakshmi early? And he said, she was done. All her samskaras were gone, you know. She pointed out that how he had sat there with his hands on her like he did with his mother, how he had told that he had done with Palani Swami, even though she was not there to witness that. And he told what happened when, in that same conversation, how he had sat with his mother until all those vasanas or predispositions, those karmic, that karmic inheritance was completely dissolved and purified. He sat with his mother. But he said with Lakshmi, he said he sat there, and when all the vasanas were gone, there was no reason for him to be there anymore. So he confirmed on several occasions. Several people asked him about this. One, that was that conversation with Nagama. He basically confirmed that she was a fully realized soul. Devaraj Mudaliar tells in his account of Cow Lakshmi, because Bhagavan wrote the verse, you know, if you'll remember for the burial, the burial was very significant because they gave her the burial rites of a saint, you know. Chinnaswamy had the remains, the body, loaded on a bullock cart. They brought them over to the burial site, which was dug next to, you know, where Jackie and Vali, who had predeceased Lakshmi, were buried. And they did full abhishekam, they did the full, you know, full rites, agamic rites of a sannyasin, you know, the camphor, everything, you know. And even Bhagavan threw camphor in at the end. And then he had written that verse, that night, I think he wrote that verse about that, you know, the Cow Lakshmi left the body on the 5th of Ani in Vishaka Nakshatra, on the 12th Tithi, like that, you know, and the year of Savadari, or, you know, and like that. He goes on telling, and she was fully, and she reached mukti, or something like that, or vimukti, I can't remember what the exact word was. Well, Mudaliar comes to you and says, well, you know, you say that, you know, is this mukti are you referring to? Do you mean just like in a commonplace way when somebody leaves the body, we say Mahanirvana or Nirvana or whatever. Do you mean it that way, or was it really Nirvana? And he says it was Nirvana, you know. So there's, yeah, that's significant. I mean, because really only Mother and Lakshmi, at least in Bhagavan's lifetime, are confirmed to have reached that state, you know. So that makes Lakshmi as a devotee highly significant, you know. The fact that she's an animal just makes no difference whatsoever, you know. She was completely realized according to Bhagavan. So that's why and of course she died on what day of the week? Friday. A Friday, yeah. Born on a Friday, came to the ashram on a Friday, left the body on a Friday. You know, granite hewn stone columns, but that became our post office. Bhagavan used to read his mail here, read the ashram mail. The other thing that's impressive about this room, this building, is its size, you know. So I think the length that way is 48 feet.